Las sociedades de consumo destrozaron el medio ambiente, liquidaron millones de especies de plantas y animales, envenenaron los mares, los ríos y los lagos, contaminaron el aire, saturaron la atmósfera de dióxido de carbono y otros gases nocivos, rasgaron la capa de ozono, agotaron yacimientos de petróleo, carbón, gas natural y enormes riquezas de minerales sólidos. Exterminaron nuestros bosques y arruinaron los suyos. ¿Qué quedó para nosotros? El subdesarrollo, la pobreza, la dependencia, el atraso, la deuda y la incertidumbre. Para las sociedades superdesarrolladas, el problema no es crecer, sino distribuir. Y no solo distribuir entre ellas, sino distribuir entre todos. El crecimiento sostenible de que se habla es imposible sin una distribución más justa entre todos los países. Quiera o no, la humanidad es hoy una sola familia y todos tendremos el mismo destino. Ante la profunda crisis actual, nos ofrece un futuro todavía peor, en el que no se resolvería jamás la tragedia económica, social y ecológica de un mundo que será cada vez más ingobernable. Algo tiene que hacerse para salvar la humanidad. Un mundo mejor es posible.
Coloro che erano venuti qui per manifestare pacificamente il loro dissenso non abbiano potuto farlo pacificamente perché elementi dediti quasi professionalmente con la vocazione alla violenza.
Property damage is not violent. You can't violate a building or a window or something like that. It's very different to us than a question of violence. That isn't violent unless you're advocating attacking individuals, which we do not do.
The elite class was sort of panicking, after Seattle especially. So they sort of were looking for the reason. And the only name you can point at was John Zerzan.
If you're looking for a mind behind the movement, it's definitely John Zerzan. He has written this one book, basically thinks that in order to save the world, we have to go back to Stone Age. And the way to get there is to destroy the industries and everything.
I find it kind of curious or strange that I've been called the architect of the tactic of property damage or the black bloc kind of activity. That certainly isn't true.
Zerzan lives a very, very modest life. And for example, for a long time, his only income, he was making money by giving his own blood.
We're trying to encourage the questioning, just the questioning. Why do people go out there and try to protest or try to, do something? That isn't mindless violence. The mindlessness is sitting there doing dope, watching MTV, and then you go and get a job and you just schlep along. And to me, that's violent. There's more and more signs everywhere that the life of consumerism is really not a satisfying life.
We cannot let the terrorists achieve the objective of frightening our nation to the point where people don't shop. Where people don't shop.
The will to consume terrorizes you. We're terrorized into being consumers. We have the freedom to choose between brand A and brand B and brand C. That's about it for freedom.
We cannot let the terrorists achieve the objective of frightening our nation to the point where we don't conduct business. Where people don't shop.
Yeah, I think there's too much stuff to constantly work and constantly consume. It's madness. It's destroying everything, and it just has to go. I see very little that's worth preserving. I see no value or health in maintaining the system. And to get all these things, it is a matter of coercion after all. People are forced to be in the mines and on the assembly lines. And without these things, you don't have all this stuff. You don't have a world of things that we're supposed to strive after all of our lives. I don't think there's anyone who seriously embraces it, but the inertia carries it forward. It has to be stopped. It has to be destroyed.
We will have a new world. When people don't shut up, we will have a new world. When people don't shut up. When people don't shut up. When people don't shut up.
The will to consume terrorizes you. The will to consume terrorizes you. The will to consume terrorizes you.
You know that I think that young people today don't have any future. I think everybody in the world now can feel, can feel the power of these large multinational corporations who are really starting to rule the world. These large multinational corporations spending $400 billion a year trying to sell us fast food and trying to sell us cars, then of course that has a huge impact on us. The 30-second television spot is, I think, the most powerful piece of communication that human beings have ever come up with. You are sitting there in your chair, passive, nothing to say, and outside there's some smart people who are producing fantastic television shows and commercials. They are the powerful producers of information and producers of meaning. And you are the passive consumer of that meaning. And that meaning isn't even good meaning. It's mostly propaganda for consumer culture. And then you think that happiness means to buy more and more, and at Christmas time especially, let's go out into the malls, let's go out into the malls, let's go out into the malls and really buy stuff, you know.
$10 on a barrel of oil, whites off 1%. 1%. 1%.
People are told that the modern technological future is empowering people, is bringing people closer together, is giving them a great access to variety. I remember as a child, we were told technology would free people and they wouldn't have to be working so much. Well, I travel around and I overhear conversations all the time from people saying, I've got my beeper, I've got my cell phone, I've got my beeper, I've got my cell phone, I can't get away from work at all. Even commuting or at home, people are on this kind of electronic leash with all of these new devices. They're less and less separate from work and technology.
1%.
How we support Bluetooth, how we support 3G.
1%.
How we support Bluetooth, how we support 3G.
1%.
It will be possible to stay at home and do your job and just video conference with your fellow workers.
1%.
The computer, I think, is going to be the very best tool for letting people socialize with each other.
1%.
This is certainly a tool that can bring people together
1%.
more than
1%.
than isolate them.
I think modern technology favors distancing over closeness, efficiency over playfulness, distancing over closeness, efficiency over playfulness.
Significant figure, you have to say, and it really plays a big impact on the stock market. You have to say $10 on a barrel of oil wipes off 1% of global GDP, off 1% of global GDP, off 1% of global GDP.
Distancing over closeness, efficiency over playfulness, distancing over closeness, efficiency over playfulness, variety. I'd like to see a gigantic project of dismantling, of just getting rid of all this stuff, of tearing up the freeways and the roads, and just getting rid of all this stuff that rests on the destruction of nature, that separates us from the natural world, that has people on this treadmill to constantly work and constantly consume. It's madness. It's destroying everything, and it just has to go.
The average North American consumes 5 times more than a Mexican, 10 times more than a Chinese person, and 30 times more than a person from India.
Everybody in the world now can feel the power of these large multinational corporations. Many of these companies are much more powerful than even governments.
Developers.
The first world. 6. We are 20% of the people of the world. And yet we are consuming 80% of the world's resources. This level of consumption is simply not sustainable. If we continue to consume at this current rate, then eventually I think we're going to hit the wall. If we are so stupid that we don't listen to the early warning signals that the planet is sending us. 3. But it's going to be a terrible time in history that may take hundreds of years before the planet heals again.
2. Developers. Yeah.
There'll be a global economic collapse.
1.
There'll be a global economic collapse.
0. Ignition. Liftoff. 30 minutes after the hour.
¿Qué clase de basura? Es repugnante el comportamiento de muchos gobernantes al ver derrumbarse como castillos de naipes sus modelos económicos.
A comfortable existence, a career, all the promises of material well-being are rather empty. And I think for quite a few people, they certainly understand that emptiness and the severe limits on fulfillment and freedom Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. Otherwise, people would, well, I'm just going to get a good job. I'll be happy. Well, who's happy?
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Ballmer! Come on! Get up! Get up! Come on! Come on! Give it up for me! I have 4 words for you. Love. Dies. Company, yeah!
Let's take it one more time.
Love.
Dies.
Company, yes! I love this country.
am calling for a new ethic. Developed nations have a duty not only to share our wealth, but also to encourage sources that produce wealth.
Why do people go out there and try to protest or try to, do something? That isn't mindless violence. The mindlessness is sitting there doing dope, watching MTV, and then you go and get a job and you just schlep along. I mean, to me, that's violent. Targeted property damage or property destruction is necessary. It does break out of the confines of the politics as usual. What do you achieve by holding a sign, doing the protest as usual stuff? I've seen decades of it. It doesn't do anything. People pay no attention. Why should they pay any attention? It's not worthy of attention. But when people fight, that is something. It does grab the attention, and it should, because it's real stuff. It isn't just this symbolic game of, oh, it makes me feel good, I have my sign and stuff. Well, I don't care about that. If it was valid, if it was not ineffective, much better. I would much rather have a nice, polite, peaceful, nobody is put in danger, nobody gets hurt, no one gets arrested, nobody gets hit on the head by a cop, and not even a window is broken. Ideal. Except it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Property damage, property damage, property destruction, property damage, property damage, property destruction, property destruction, property damage, property damage, property destruction, property destruction, property damage, property damage, property destruction, 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 destruction.
I'm calling for a new ethic.
Corporate property is the most obvious legitimate target in my view. Banks, expensive stores, chains like Starbucks and so forth. People understand that as part of the global system, part of this encroaching, standardized, destructive form that is wiping out all differences, all freedom. Property damage, property damage, property destruction, property destruction, property damage, property damage, property destruction, property destruction, property damage, property damage, property destruction, property destruction, property damage, property damage, property destruction. People for 2 million years didn't destroy the natural world. They didn't have war. They had leisure time, so forth and so on. That's what primitivism refers to in one way. And to me, that's very inspiring.
that in this new world, the people will get back their own culture again. In this new world, we will have a new set of values. There will be a big paradigm shift, a big global mind shift, where people will suddenly say, I don't want a fancy car. Where people will suddenly say, I don't want another Big Mac. Where people will suddenly say, I don't want to wear any diesel jeans. Where people will suddenly say, I want to have a simple, fulfilling life. Where people will suddenly say, I want to have a simple, fulfilling life.
I want something else.
A simple, fulfilling life.
Yeah!